potentially happen over the next few years.
Governor, for county officials and city officials who don't sign the update to the 287B agreements, this is happening over in Orange County, will you remove them from office?
We've made it very clear. This is not a policy debate at this point. The policy debate was at the beginning of the year when I called the special session. Our law in Florida is that you have to do your best maximum efforts to assist with immigration enforcement. And Florida's led the way on that. We've led on arresting of illegal aliens. Obviously, you're now seeing the flights for DHS. That cadence is starting to increase. I think you're going to see that go up dramatically. And that's the policy of Florida. So you don't have the ability to just say you're not going to be on the team on this. Now, the Attorney General, I know, has engaged in them, and he's creating a record. And so what I do is, if it comes time, I look at the record, I look at my constitutional authority, and if there's a conflict between how elected officials are acting and the duties that they have to not just faithfully uphold the law, but a whole host of other duties that are in the Florida Constitution that would give the governor the power to suspend if they breach the duties. We go through that analysis and then make decisions. But I think that I've shown that I'm willing to do that. I mean, remember, we had a state attorney here in Hillsborough County that took positions that some of these laws were more recommendations than binding, and that went afoul of what a prosecutor's discretion would entail. We did the suspension. We put in Judge Susie Lopez. Obviously, there's not that many people that wish we could go back at this point, and Hillsborough voters, even though he tried to run again, she won a resounding victory. And so I think that we've shown ability. My first week in office, we removed the sheriff of Broward County for the failures involving the response to the Parkland shooting in February of 2014. Now, I wasn't, or 2018. I wasn't governor then, but it was a huge, huge wound for this state and that community. And I got to know a lot of the parents over that year as I was running for governor, and all they wanted was some accountability. No one had been held accountable at all by the time I took office. And so we did that. Florida Senate permanently relieved him of his duties and upheld that suspension. And then when we did the grand jury investigation, we removed a number of the school board members down there for a whole host of different reasons as well. So we have a track record of doing what needs to be done to ensure compliance. But what I would say is that the law is very clear. I had to fight the legislature on this. Blaze was with me on this. There was a handful of the others that were with me on it, but most, led by the speaker, they did not want to require participation with state and local. That was in their initial bill, and they actually took away all the governor's authority and would have mothballed our existing operations. Horrible, horrible piece of legislation. So we had to fight very hard to be able to get to the point where we got, where these duties are imposed in law. And I can tell you, if you don't do it, even though Florida bans sanctuary cities, if you don't have an affirmative duty, what I think some of those areas, the Gainesvilles and the Orlandos and some of these little pockets around the state, they end up devolving into de facto sanctuary. They won't run afoul of our sanctuary laws. They'll know kind of how to do that. So it's not going to be flagrant like LA or flagrant like Chicago or some of these places, but they won't be doing what is necessary so that the policy is effective. So they're expected to do it. I know the Attorney General has sent a missive, and I will be watching how that unfolds very carefully. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, you recently said Florida got a raw deal in the census count, but the state under your leadership didn't invest in U.S. Census outreach. How do you reconcile that?
But that's not the issue. The Biden administration's own figures a couple years later showed Florida had the second, that the census was off by us. They overcounted in these blue states. It was almost a complete difference between red and blue. And first of all, I think a lot of that money would have been wasted, quite frankly. And some of that, the blue states are doing that to count illegal aliens. I don't believe illegal aliens should be counted in the census. I think it's wrong. I think it's unconstitutional that they're counted in the census. So there was no way that I was going to devote taxpayer money for that. even without counting that, we should have gotten at least one more seat. I mean, just think about it. Over that period, now granted, Florida's population really took off from the day the census ended, closed, I think, April of 2020, which was like the start of COVID. We boomed from there like never before. But still, over that decade, we did gain population. Are you trying to tell me Oregon and Florida were equal in population gain over that period of time? No, of course not. People know that. So the Biden people even had to put out analysis a couple years later where they looked at it and they acknowledged that there was flaw here. I was told at the tail end of the Trump administration that we were going to get at least 2 seats. And so we were shocked when it came out. Now the problem is there's not good remedies to be able to, because I wanted to bring a lawsuit. And I was like, what can we do? And they're like, well, you know, you can maybe have them order a new count, but that's not going to help you in the intervening time. And so I've spoken with the Commerce Secretary under President Trump right now, Secretary Lutnick, about it. They agree that this census was flawed. They agree that Florida did not get the population that it should have gotten. But they also believe, as I do, that this next census, whether they do it mid-decade, which I know they've considered doing another census, because I think you have to do it once every 10 years. It doesn't mean you can't do it more than every 10 years under the Constitution. They should do it and count people that are legally allowed to be here. How many seats would California lose if you only counted lawful people, citizens? They would lose a lot of seats because they're a sanctuary state. For us, you know, we would stand to gain because we did not spend money to try to count illegals, because I don't think that that's constitutionally proper. That is ultimately going to be resolved by the U.S. Supreme Court, because I do think the Trump administration is going to put in for a census that is not going to count foreign nationals, that is just going to count U.S. citizens. And that's really the way, I think that's what the Founding Fathers intended. I mean, they never really contemplated that you'd have a president that would intentionally allow all this people to come in without rule of law. But nevertheless, that's what we had to deal with for the past 4 years. So I think we did get shortchanged. Any way you cut it, we got shortchanged. Even if you put the illegal issue aside, we still got shortchanged with the way they did the calculations. And isn't it interesting? Everyone was forecasting Rhode Island was going to lose a seat, and they didn't. So little Rhode Island has 2 seats, so they didn't lose a seat. Well, come to find out, in Biden's administration, who was the Commerce Secretary? The former governor of Rhode Island. I mean, isn't that interesting that that would have happened that way? So I just think that the analysis that even Biden's people had to put out showed without question that we should have a different count for the remaining of the decade. So we've had 2 elections under the current census. There's going to be 3 more elections, congressional elections, 26, 28, and 30, before the next census is done and the next maps are drawn. We could have a new map anyways in Florida, but if we got additional seat awarded to us, then we would be forced to draw. There would be no discretion at all, because we'd go from 28 to 29, maybe even to 30. You know, I had some people in the administration tell me they thought Florida would get like 3 to 5 more seats if they did it properly. Like, I haven't seen that analysis done, but I've had people tell me that. So clearly, and then also we're malapportioned because they stopped the count on April 1st of 2020. The Census Bureau did. I'm not saying that was like anything wrong with that, but that's just when the count stopped. But look what's happened since April of 2020. Look around Hillsborough County to see the growth. So there's some districts in this state where you have way more votes being cast than in other districts in these races. And you wonder, you know, how is it that that ends up shaking out the way it does? So I do think that we're malapportioned within the state as well as malapportioned in the country. And the thing about it was, we had a presidential election last year where some people were saying that if Harris just won those Rust Belt states, that would be 270 to 268. If that had happened. So it would have been Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And that would have been a huge crisis for this country, because people like me would have said, well, wait a minute, if you did the census properly, even her winning those 3 states would not have given 270. Trump would have had over 270 with a proper count, even if he didn't win any of those states. And so we really, now obviously he won all of them, it wasn't close, but I mean, we would have had a constitutional crisis in this country had it ended up settled into that. So let's get I hope that they redo the census. I think Florida would benefit if they redid the census, but even short of that, I do think that, you know, we're going to be looking at the pathways to be able to do the redistricting here in Florida. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you.